Good morning and good afternoon, wherever you might be watching from. We're excited to be here today for another episode of the Executive Lens. I'm here with my amazing co-host, Shantae Smith-Daniels, a fractional COO and founder of SSD Consulting, LLC. How are you doing today, Shantae?
I'm doing great this wonderful Friday. The last Friday of January. I'm doing
Last
amazing.
Friday, this this month has flown by. I
Mhm.
mean, we could have a whole conversation about that, but you blink and it's like, okay, it's almost February. What happened?
Mhm.
But I'm excited for us to be here because our conversation today, everyone, is going to be about the fact that a plan is not a strategy. Because typically at the beginning of the year, everyone's got a plan as to how things are going to go in their business for the year, or go for the company. But oftentimes what we find is that, with Shantae helping on the ops side and me working from a leadership perspective, is that folks are conflating the idea of a plan versus a strategy, and then they wonder why they're not seeing success. And this was sparked by a video that I had watched from the Harvard Business Review that was on the same topic. And so Shantae and I got together to say, this would be a good topic for the executive lens. And so Shantae, let me kick it to you. When you think about from operations, right? Because you have like the organization at large and they have all these big ideas, and then you have the operations whose job it is to actually execute and keep things running. And so I wanted to get your perspective when you hear this idea of a plan versus a strategy. How does that show up from an ops perspective, or any thoughts kind of just to get us started here?
Yeah, so to me, the difference is so the strategy is our external world in the business, right? So the
Mhm.
strategy for me is based on our mission and vision statement. Where are we going? Who are we playing with? And how are we going to do it? Right? So from the planning aspect, our job is to create plans within the organization that's going to lead us to those outcomes. And I was even talking to you. I was like, yeah, let's do some strategic planning. But really, that's just a jargony word for people that want to get together and do
Yeah.
some planning, because strategy and planning are two different things. But a lot of times when I start working with founders, I find they're not focused, they don't have a real strategy. They have a lot of KPIs that are more task based, but not really leading to the outcome they need to actually grow their business.
Mm. Yeah, I love that, because you hear strategic planning, right, and all that, and it's like, but truly, those are two independent activity, right? And so the way that I think about a plan is that a plan is a list of things that you hope are going to happen, right? We're going to hit this and this and that. And like you said, they have the KPIs. And the idea is that in a perfect world, we're just going to hope that everything happens and we hit all these KPIs. And I feel like the strategy is really the idea behind how do we actually achieve those, and what happens if everything isn't perfect. Because hope, I tell my clients this all the time, hope is not a strategy. A strategy is a strategy, right?
Right.
And so I love the idea of, kind of separating and not kind of conflating the two. um the garbage truck is like outside my door, so if y'all are hearing extra sounds, y'all, that's because the garbage truck is doing the most. Um and I think about, Shantae, when I was in corporate, and my finance background, we always had the annual plan and budget, right?
Mhm.
And I think about how many things had to go right in order for us to hit everything that was on the page, right? We
Mhm.
built in a little bit of contingency, but it was truly like we were hoping that all the stars align in order for us to get this to happen. And honestly, in business, you never have the stars fully aligning.
Right.
And I wanted to ask you a follow-up question. So when you think about strategy, I feel like with strategy there has to be some kind of trade-off, no? Like, because with plan, it's all the stars are aligning, the gods are smiling on us, and you don't have to give up anything. It's an ideal scenario. But I feel like if you're truly thinking about, thinking strategically, I feel like there has to be some kind of trade-off, no?
Yeah, you have to. So if you have a strategy in your organization, why you're doing the things you're doing, how you're doing it, where you're going to do it, that strategy, that trade-off is being able to confidently say no to something,
Mm.
right? That you're not ready for or isn't part of your strategy. So for me, if I wanted to sell, I don't know, lollipops to ducks, right? And then I'm just making this stuff up. Just hope, just come on to me. So if I
I'm
wanted to
sorry, I
sell
had the visual of the
if my
lollipop with the
strategy
duck.
was if my strategy was to sell lollipops to ducks in the suburbs, right? And then someone says, "Well, Shantae, why don't you come sell Snickers to horses?" Well, hold on now. I'm doing this strategy with my ducks, right? So I'm gonna have to say no because you're going outside our strategy, which or my planning for this session is getting me to sell more lollipops to ducks, right? So I think a lot of times when your strategy is strong, it's easier for you as a CEO or founder to say no, we're not going in that direction right now.
I love that. And I think that's where a lot of leaders get stuck. So just putting the leadership hat back on, I feel like a lot of leaders get stuck because they don't realize that if you're executing on a strategy, so you built the high level plan, but now you have a strategy as to how we're going to get there, and and really being, what's the word, being intentional about the actions that you take. It requires you to say no to things. You can't say yes to everything. And what I find is that also requires some discomfort and some conversations that may be difficult to have, because if you're saying no, right, or if you're pushing back, if you're saying, hey, this doesn't align with where we're going, it can cause, especially if it's coming from maybe someone above you or something like that, you can have that discomfort because they're going to say, oh, well, we have this plan, and like, again, this grand plan, but it's like, but does that really align with where we're going, who we want to be, and the specific actions we need to take to get there? Because if the answer is no, you have to be willing to say no to that. And I think, just thinking about the leadership angle a little bit longer, I think that for employees, they're looking for their leaders to say no and give them a clear direction and a clear strategy, right? Because if you only have a plan, you're probably going to have whiplash trying to figure out, well, how do we get there, right? You're doing this, you're doing that, you're trying this other thing over here, because all you have is this list of things you hope are happening. But if you take the time to build this clear strategy and clear intentional roadmap, your employees don't have to have the whiplash as to what we're trying to achieve, and you as a leader can provide them with clarity about where they're going. Any thoughts on that from an ops perspective?
Yeah, so from an ops perspective, it's the same. So from an ops perspective, I always look at the company's vision, mission, and their strategy, because what that's going to do for me is tell me what people we need, right? Do we have the right people in the right seats? Do we have the right systems to get us to where we're going? And to the planning part or the KPI creation part that I do, what KPIs do I need to create for the team to get us to the outcome that the founder or leader wants to accomplish with their strategy? So if the leader doesn't know their strategy, that's going to be an issue for ops, because like you said, we're on a seesaw. Like, are you feeding ducks today? Or are we feeding horses? Like, what do you want to do? So it's really important. So that's why when I walk in, I'm always like, okay, what's your vision statement? Got it. What's your mission statement? What's your strategy? Like, what are we here to do? How are we going to do it? What are we going to do? And that just helps me come in and build the ops a little bit better.
You know, something you said just it brought me back to the AI conversation we had last quarter, because a lot of folks, they have AI as kind of, they want to implement artificial intelligence, but they don't have a strategy as to why they want to implement it and what problems it's really specifically supposed to solve within their organization, how it's going to improve, whether it's the customer experience or the internal experience. And so So I'm thinking about that now, because they're trying to chase every shiny AI tool that's coming out, because again, they just have a plan. Implement AI, save money, right? That's the whole idea. But they don't really have a clear strategy around, well, why do we need AI? Like, what processes specifically are we going to transform with this? What part of the business is truly going to be better as we implement this? And then something else you said about KPIs is that it also helps you to be more, mindful and deliberate with the kind of KPIs you have. Because now you're not just going to be measuring for measuring's sake, right? Because, so many organizations, you have charts and charts of KPIs, but it's like, why are we measuring that? Like, what action are we going to take based on that? So I love the idea of making sure that you have a strategy that will help you to measure the right things, right? Because if you can't measure it, does it truly matter? Right. And so I love that. So thank you for that perspective, especially on the KPI front. So I wanted to come back to just thinking about the plan process, because I feel like the planning process, it makes people or organizations feel like they're like being productive, right? Because they're busy, right? We're planning, we're we got the people around the table, we're in the conference room, and we're doing the things. But are we?
We may not be doing the things. We may just be around a conference table because someone said, let's do a strategic planning session, right? And so we are creating KPIs based on tasks, but not really focused on the outcome, especially like in areas of sales, things like that. What's your outcome? So yes, you want your reps to have a certain number of calls per week, but why? Right? Is that leading to a certain closure rate with clients? Is that leading to that closure rate? Does that lead to a certain revenue amount per client? Or are you just focused on how many calls they're making, right? So a lot of times in operations, what we do as operations people, we kind of come in like an eagle, right? We look at everything, right? We see everything. And then what we do is we work backwards. Like what steps, what KPIs do we need to have in place to get to this goal? But to what we're talking about, if leadership is unclear on a strategy, we're just looking fancy with a whole bunch of Post-it notes and highlighters, making a real pretty KPI dashboard that really isn't growing the business or the organization.
Yeah, I mean, folks, they love their Power BI and their Tableau dashboards, man. I remember that from my corporate days, that people love putting together a dashboard. But again, what is the dashboard for? Like, what, how is it helping us understand, are we getting closer to the direction we want to go to, the destination? Or again, to your point, is it just that we spend a lot of time making this thing, look nice, and it really, really doesn't deliver? And one of the other things that also helps me think about is, when you don't have that clarity and you're just measuring for measuring's sake, I feel like the priorities will change every quarter. So as a leader, you have, for quarter one, we're going to do this thing. And then quarter two, we're going to do this thing. And quarter three, we're going to do this thing. And it just seems like things are shifting, and it doesn't seem like a cohesive roadmap towards the destination. And so your employees are likely going to get burned out. So even besides the whiplash of being confused, it's just burned out because they're chasing the rabbits, right? Like they're chasing the rabbits all year, and they're not even sure what it's for and why they're going there. And so a follow-up I would have to that is, so someone's listening to this conversation today, and they're like, well, Shantae, you said that we have to have the right KPIs and all this other stuff. But what is it that they should be thinking about before they even get to the KPIs when it comes to really building a strategy? If we had to give them real specifics now as to, hey, I don't want to just build this high level frou-frou plan with hope. I want to build a true strategy. What are the things that you would share with them, as they go back to their ops teams or anything like that right now?
Yeah, so I would say, here are a couple questions I'll have them ask themselves. Why are we here? Right? Why are we here? Who do we serve? How are we going to serve them? Where are we going to serve them? Right? So once you figure those things out, you can figure out your strategy. So why we're here, who are you serving, and why we're serving, and where we're going to serve. Because that's going to help you build out your plan for your KPIs. So like I said, we always start with the broad picture, right? So my duck example, I don't know why I picked ducks today. I don't know what's going on. Maybe somebody's buying a Jeep. Is somebody buying a Jeep today? I feel like a Jeep's coming on. But my duck example, we're serving ducks in the suburbs with lollipops, right? And so I know I need to start catering to ducks. We need to make sure we have enough lollipops on site. We need to market to the suburbs, right? So those questions for your strategy are actually the foundation you need to create the KPIs going forward. And I will say this, your KPIs are going to be pretty static, but also it could change a little bit because you could be talking to the ducks in the suburb and you realize, oh, wait, we missed a nuance here and we need to figure out how to get in there and maybe adjust one of these KPIs or add another KPI to get to the desired outcome we want. So yes, KPIs are static, but also a little flexible depending on if they're actually matching your strategy and getting you to the outcome.
I love the idea, like when you said, why are we here? Right? Because I think for a lot of leaders, even, I don't think that is they even think about that often enough. And so they're chasing, them and their teams are chasing the rabbits, but they hardly slow down to say, why are we here? What are we seeking to achieve together? And why does that matter in society, or why does that matter to the organization? Because then it helps, just I'm thinking about the employee engagement side now, is that helps to ground your employees as to why they're there and why their work matters and why they should be investing their effort and showing up every day. Yes, they're getting a paycheck, but for a lot of people, they can go elsewhere. I always say people can make money weaving baskets and selling coconuts on the side of the road if that's really what they want to do. They don't have to keep the job that you're offering. And so you being able to paint a picture to help them understand why they're there and why their work matters, that helps to engage them and rally them around that vision that you talked about, and rally them around the strategy, willing to put in the effort. And then when you think about who you're serving, again, that helps to shape everything you do. It helps to shape the processes, the experience that you provide for the customer. And again, it also helps to determine, do you have the right people in the right seats? And you mentioned that earlier, because part of what I talk to leaders about is from a hiring perspective, right? Like who are you hiring? Are you hiring the right people? Because oftentimes they're just trying to put butts in seats, right? I have a gap, somebody left, I need to fill it. And so, so from my perspective, this helps them to think about, do I have the right people staffing this organization? And are the right people in the right jobs? And so as you're measuring performance and all of that, it all ties back to what you shared there. So that's really, really helpful.
And I just want to add, can I add something real quick?
Of course, please. Yes.
So and it's so important for founders and leaders of organizations to stay in their lane, right?
Shaking the
It's
table.
noisy. It's noisy out here in these streets. It's noisy in these streets. And just thinking like LinkedIn, you'll get 10 million people telling you how to post on LinkedIn, right? But what's your strategy? Who are you talking to? Where are you going? Where are you supposed to be? So as leaders and founders, it's really important that every once in a while we reset our algorithm, understand why we're here, understand our strategy, and make sure everything we're doing in our company is keeping us on the path to the outcome we want to achieve.
Man, that's real good, because I'm thinking about the fact, like you said, you're going to get so much advice from everywhere. And and even for whether you're a small business owner or a large organization, there's somebody on the internet telling you, here's how to be more successful in reaching your customer, here's how to be more successful in your operations, for example. And so now you're trying to pull from all of these different places, and you're wondering why you're not getting anywhere. And so I put this in my LinkedIn newsletter earlier in the week, where I said, imagine if you're driving in a car and you've got the GPS going on Google Maps. The person next to you is using MapQuest. The person in the back seat has a paper map, right? Mm-hmm. Everyone has a different way for you to get to that destination. So if you're listening to everybody, you're likely going to get lost. Or if you get there, you're going to be so frustrated that when you get there that you're going to be like, I don't want to drive with any of these people again. To hell with this, right? Mm-hmm. And so I love the idea of, being able to stay in your lane and stay focused on that strategy, because then it helps you to drown out that noise that you've been hearing and really say, okay, this is where we want to go. This is who we want to be. It doesn't matter what external voices are saying. This is where we want to go. And so as we start to wind down this conversation, I just want you to think about, so that there's someone who's listening right now who is, we can go to small business owners first and then talk about larger organizations. So there's someone who's a founder right now who's saying, Shantae, I thought I had a strategy, and I think I know why we're here. I did talk to my team about that, but I'm still feeling very lost. Obviously the answer is to call you for sure.
I was going to say that. I was like, just call me.
Yeah, but before they come to you, you want this. Are there action steps you would want someone to take now, where they're saying, hey, I thought I was doing these things, but I feel like maybe I'm stuck or I'm confused. What would you recommend they do even before they call you?
Yeah, so it goes back to the foundations. I can't help you with your foundation, right? I'm coming in to help you with your operational foundation. So go back to your vision statement, go back to your mission statement, right? Is your strategy aligning with those two things, right? Mm-hmm. Who are you serving? Why are you there? How do you plan on getting there and staying there and expanding in that market? So those are three things you can ask yourself. And if you don't know, then that's some quiet time you need to yourself as a founder to figure that out.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's important, because you can help them with with the operations, but it's on the founders and their executive team, or if you're a solo person, it's important for you to take the time to evaluate, because if you are not clear on who you are, who you want to be, what kind of organization you want to have, who you want to serve, it's going to be hard for any process, for any help, for any consulting to be effective for you. And so I think if you've been listening for the past 20 minutes or so, what we keep coming back to is the need for clarity. And when you're that clear, it then empowers you to say no, because you're not going to be going and chasing everything, because you know what you're focused on. You're going to stay in your lane, as Shantae mentioned, because it's like, hey, I know where I'm going. And so for the founders who are listening, ask yourself, do you even have a mission statement or a vision statement? How much time did you invest in that to make sure that you're clear on who you are and what you want your impact in the world to be? And so, because then Shantae can help you, but it starts with you doing that work first. And so I want to take it up a notch then. So that's for the founders, right? Who are they're trying to find, they're starting their own organization. But for folks who are in these bigger companies and they have this behemoth of an ops organization, right? And they have a behemoth of a leadership team, and they've got marketing people and sales people and the executive team, and they're feeling stuck, right? Because they're not setting the vision or the mission. Someone is giving them their directives. So what would your advice be to those individuals who are like, man, I'm trying, I thought I was doing it, but I'm trying to listen to all the voices that are telling me what to do? What would you recommend for those folks?
So I'm always a proponent of feedback. If you don't know, you need to ask. If you want to know, you should ask, right? Because as leadership, it is their job to share with you the strategy for the organization. And if they haven't done a good job doing that, I feel like you need to let them know in some way, because you may get frustrated because you're doing these KPIs that are based on tasks, but you can't see the end goal, right? I keep calling these people, or I keep replying these emails, but what's the end? What's the outcome? Where are we going? What's the end of this situation, right? What are we trying to achieve? So I would say you probably need to hook up with now Julia, and learn how to talk to your executive leadership team and say, look, I'm not clear on the strategy. We're not clear on the strategy. Because also in the strategy, I think people like to make things so complicated, right? Your strategy should be simple. You should be able to read it to like a 10-year-old. Now, I guess 10. I don't know how those, my kids are old. I don't know. But read it to a 10-year-old and they kind of understand it. So again, my ducks. I got ducks. They're getting lollipops in the suburbs, and how we're going to go about doing that, right? So another thing for leadership is not to overcomplicate it, so the people on your team are confused or can't see the outcome that you're expecting.
I love that. And the ducks example is going to stick with me long after this is over. But really that idea of asking questions and making sure that you're getting the insights, that you're not just going along with the herd, especially if so for the leaders who are listening, and if you have any involvement in executing on strategy in some way or setting it, if you are unclear because you're getting directives from all sides, it's incumbent upon you to ask the question, like, hey, I'm not sure, tell me how this aligns with the vision we have. Tell me how this aligns with X, Y, and Z, or I'm not sure about this connection point or that. So it's really important for you to ask the questions if you're unclear. Because you don't want to take that lack of clarity that you have and then pass it off, to your organization. So I love the idea of getting that feedback. And when I think about for myself, from a leadership perspective, I think it's important for, when you are being brought into a room to say, okay, let's build the plan. We're going to build the plan. We're going to get the team together to plan, right? I think it's important for you to also say, okay, well, how are we going to operationalize this? Like, how are we going to bring this to life? Right. So we have the list of things, right, that we think we can control, that we're going to hope for. But like, how are we going to bring this to life? Like, that should be the question that you're asking around the table. And again, if it's like, well, we hope that the market will do this, and we hope that the whatever, how are we going to actually make this happen? What do we envision? How, where are we going to move money from, or which markets are we going to focus on? What teams are we going to shore up in order to make this real? Because then that forces people to be more concrete with the things that they're asking you. And to Shantae's point around simplicity, right? When you're able to ask these questions, it causes people to get very clear and specific on, well, man, maybe, how are we going to do this? Oh, how are we going to do this? I hadn't thought about it. Like, it forces you to get real clear, get concrete, and get simple, because complicated things you can't execute. You simply can't execute. So if we had to round out the conversation, any final words, parting thoughts, and if anyone who's listening, if you had any questions that we didn't get to around, what a plan is versus a strategy, how to implement in your organization, you can drop it here as we start to close out. But any final thoughts or comments, Shantae?
No, what's your strategy? Once you know your strategy, everything else can fall into place. Great CEOs and founders understand that clarity helps the organization, and the importance of like you were saying, operationalizing the things that will have the organization be successful. But if you do not have a strategy, if it is not clear, it is going to be chaos and confusion for a very long time.
And my thought is, we don't want to plan for planning's sake. What I saw, and because then obviously then the strategy falls behind, because what I saw in corporate was that, we would be taking so long to build the plan that by the time the plan was done, it was already outdated, much less trying to operationalize whatever we said. And so, my advice to the leaders is, take time. If you're looking at the January, February time frame to say, okay, we're building a plan, I would say, high level it, right? What is it that you're trying to achieve? And then, leverage your strategy to say, how do we get there? How do we make sure that we're going in the right direction? We have these things we're hoping for, but how do we ensure that we're going in the right direction? And how do we make sure that our employees are on board with this? How do we make sure that they understand why we're doing what we're doing and we're not just doing things for doing them's sake? That level of clarity is going to be, it's huge currency for you, and credibility with your team, because they're saying, hey, we know where we're going. We're willing to put in the effort. We're excited about the direction as well. So if you have any questions or if you want to follow up, if you want to work with Shantae for her to help you now that you understand, if you've taken the time to reflect on your vision and your mission, and now you want some help on the ops front, Shantae, where can the good people find you?
Well, you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm Shantae Smith-Daniels. I'm also on TikTok. I think I'm Shantae, the fractional COO on TikTok. So you can find me there, or go to my website, www.ssdconsultingllc.com.
Awesome. And so if you want to connect with me, I'm always on LinkedIn. It's my favorite platform. You can also connect with me on my website at rockcareer.com. And then I'm at the Julia Rock on most other social media platforms. And I want to say thank you to Spirit Dupree and Walter Daniels III for joining us in the chat today. Thank you for watching with us, and for all of you that have taken the time to watch. If there are questions that you didn't get answered, feel free to drop a comment on the platform wherever you're watching it, because we're streaming to Facebook, LinkedIn, as well as YouTube. Feel free to DM myself or email or contact Shantae or myself when the time comes, if if there's something that you didn't get answered. But thank you all for watching. We'll be back next quarter with another episode of The Executive Lens. Thank you all for watching.